want to be forever young. Do you really want to live forever?
One life,
forever,
one love,
and ever.
one soul.
Today's January 14th, 2020. I'm Brent Nally, and I'm really excited to be speaking with today the sleep doctor, Dr. Michael Breus. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Breus.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brett. I'm excited to be here and mix it up a little bit.
Definitely. So my audience is a longevity-focused audience, and they hear me all the time talk about how important sleep is. So I'm really excited to have none other than the sleep doctor here with us today. Dr. Michael Breus is a clinical psychologist, and he has a great TEDx talk, which you can see, right up there if you click on the link. And he's also been featured on many popular shows over many, many years, including Oprah, over 40 times on Dr. Oz now. So Dr. Breus, is it fair to say you're basically the sleep expert for Dr. Oz? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty close to that for sure. I also do a lot of work on a TV show called The Doctors and Rachael Ray and Kelly and Ryan. So it's great because everybody's interested in sleep. It's a great topic.
I love The Doctors. I was watching that almost every episode back in 2011, 12 when they first started. I don't find the time as much anymore these days, but it's a great show.
Yeah, me too.
CBS This Morning a few times, and then also Dave Asprey, who's a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then I recently saw you about a month ago on Tom Billion, and I really liked Tom's show, and I really liked that conversation. So also, Dr. Breus is a published author 3 times over. 2006, Good Night, the Sleep Doctor's 4-week program to better sleep and better health. And by the way, everybody, check the description and the show notes below if you're watching on YouTube. I'll have links to all the products, the books, everything we talk about. thesleepdoctor.com is his website. You'll have a link there as well, and that's spelled out The Sleep Doctor, D-O-C-T-O-R. So check those links. And then his next book was 2011, The Sleep Doctor's Diet Plan, Lose Weight Through Better Sleep. And then 2016, The Power of When, Discover your chronotype and the best time to eat lunch, ask for a raise, have sex, write a novel, take your meds, and more. And then I believe Dr. Breus also has 3 more ebooks that you can find on his website for free, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, awesome. So also follow Dr. Breus on social media. He's crushing the social media game. Currently, it looks like about 119,000 followers on Instagram. Always, quick content, quick little videos. I love it. They're like 10, 30 seconds long, not too long.
Cool.
40,000 likes on his Facebook page, a lot of engagement. Very, very useful tips in there. 28,000 Twitter followers, on and on. And then the final thing before we get into it, were you just recently in Southeast Asia? I saw you post on Instagram like Chiang Mai pics.
Yeah, so my daughter studies in Beijing. She's doing her high school year abroad there. So we went to visit, and we were in Beijing, Chiang Mai, Phuket, all over the place. It was a lot of fun. Great, great part of the world for people to check out for sure.
Okay. Well, this interview isn't about me, but I just have to mention real briefly. In 2018, about 2 years ago at the beginning of the year, my wife and I quit our jobs, sold our home, and we traveled around the world to about 25 countries, and half of that was Southeast Asia. So we love Chiang Mai and all that Southeast Asia had to offer. So another conversation.
For sure.
So let's start off with something that's very relevant right now, since it's still January 14th. New Year's rest-o-lutions. I see you saying this all over social media. Please share with the audience what this means to you.
So it's, when you look at New Year's resolutions, it's things like lose weight, be happier, exercise more, become healthier, all of these different things. But one of the things you almost never see anybody say is get more sleep. And there's actually data around every single, what I call rest-o-lution, out there that shows that sleep affects all of these things. A classic example is weight loss. So most people don't know this, but when you become sleep deprived, and that's of course personal to you, what happens? So we see an elevation in a hormone called ghrelin, which is the go hormone, makes you want to eat, and a decrease in leptin, which is the stop hormone, which tells you that you're full. We see increase in appetite. We see increase in cravings. All of these things happen with sleep deprivation. And so if your New Year's resolution is, I want to lose weight and get in better shape, you just can't do it without sleeping well.
That's awesome. And you have a few other ones on there. I'll just encourage the audience to follow you on the social media platforms I mentioned and check out some of your most recent posts. I should also mention on LinkedIn, I think you have over 3,000 followers there, which I'm on LinkedIn a lot. That's the job that I quit. I worked at LinkedIn for about 3 years. And I really love what you're posting on there and how you're getting more engagement on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, it's fun. You know, it's amazing. Any platform has got people that have got sleep related issues. With LinkedIn, we do a lot of work that's around employment, right? And so things like absenteeism, presenteeism, doing better job at work, safety concerns, 24/7 manufacturing, things like that. Whereas on Instagram, it's a lot quicker and a lot shorter and easier to zap out the sleep tips or answer a couple questions here and there. But, you know, depending upon what you're interested in, I've got information literally on every platform you can imagine.
Yeah, shorter attention spans on Instagram and LinkedIn.
For sure.
Kids these days. And I joined TikTok a few months ago, and I think you can't post a video longer than 15 seconds on that one. So the attention spans are shrinking, especially
Yes.
for younger kids.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about all sorts of exciting things regarding sleep and longevity and health in general, hitting life goals, and hitting any type of goals that short-term or long-term, and how sleep can help you during this conversation. And since you mentioned LinkedIn and job, I'll just reference again the TEDx talk that you did, I think was phenomenal. And you mentioned a particular female and how you dramatically improved her life.
Yeah.
Job, right?
Yeah. So it was interesting. So I had this insomnia patient who came to me, and, you know, I mean, I'm an insomnia specialist. I do that work. I used to do that work all the time, a little bit less now. And she came to me and we tried everything. I tried cognitive behavioral therapy. We tried medication. We tried restricting bedtimes, and nothing was working. And so I brought her in the office and we really started to try to dig in even further. And she turned to me and she just said, you know, Dr. Breus, I don't think I have a sleep problem. I just feel like I sleep at the wrong time. I was like, well, tell me more about that. And she said, if I could go to bed at 1 and get up at 9 and be at work by 10, she's like, I think everything would work a whole lot better. And so I said, well, why don't you do that? And she said, well, my husband wouldn't like it, my kids wouldn't like it, and my boss would probably fire me. And I was like, well, let's see. So I said, do you mind if I call your boss? So I called her boss and I said, you know, can she come in at 10 o'clock and work, you know, an additional hour or two just to offset the time? And he said, she can do whatever she wants. I'm firing her at the end of the week. And I was like, okay, no pressure, right? And so we did. And I called him on Friday and he said, I don't know what you did to her, but I've got 3 other employees I'd love for you to take a look at. And it was really about syncing her up with her chronotype. And so for folks out there who might not know the term chronotype, you've probably heard of the concept, either being called an early bird or a night owl. Those are actually chronotypes. So historically, when we look at the literature, there's 3. There's early bird, there's kind of in the middle, and then there's night owl. My contribution is I added insomnia to that because there is a very interesting genetically predetermined insomnia, much the same way there is genetically predetermined early bird or night owl. Now, one of the things people see out there in the vernacular all the time is, you know, join the 5 a.m. club and wake up super early. And I'm telling you here, I'm telling you now, only about 20 to 25% of the population can actually do that successfully. This is a genetic predetermination. And so this patient that kind of kicked me off on this whole thing, when we looked at her genetics, she was genetically an extreme, what I call night owl or wolf. And she was at the extreme end. I mean, honestly, she could go to bed at 2 a.m. every night and that would be just fine for her. So, you know, when you start to look at these things and start to understand them, the recommendation of waking up at 4:30 in the morning to be at the gym by 5 isn't necessarily the best idea for many people out there, genetically speaking. But back to the patient. So once we discovered what was working well for her, we were able to actually start to learn more about the literature and the research. And then it got really interesting because all of a sudden we realized that this early bird, night owl, hummingbird, and insomniac turns out to have an effect across your entire 24-hour cycle. So if you're a night owl like me and your melatonin doesn't stop producing until 8 o'clock in the morning, but you wake up at 6, that's going to suck, right? Like there's just nothing about that that's going to go well. And so trying to do that is going to make all of my hormones go off, and it's just not going to work really well. I kind of think of it sort of like if you were at Grand Central Station, you've got 100 trains going in and out each hour. If one of them is off or breaks down or is late, you're going to have basically a log jam. And that's really what happens hormonally to many people's systems. And so if you can figure out what your chronotype is, and there's an easy way to do that, just check out my quiz, chronoquiz.com. We'll put those in the show notes. You can learn what your chronotype is literally in 2 minutes. And then from there, there's lots of different cool things that you can do. Everything from, like I said before, learn when to have sex, eat a cheeseburger, ask your boss for a raise. It almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's phenomenal, Dr. Breus. And my wife and I did do the chronotype test, and we weren't surprised to learn that we are both bears, and that's not uncommon because that's the most popular one, right?
That's actually the best one to be. I'd rather be a bear than a wolf any day of the week.
Yeah, because the whole society is built around bears, right?
Exactly.
So one of
the things we did learn, Brent, is that there are early bears and late bears. So we've started to discover, we've got over 1 million people take the quiz now, which is pretty amazing. And it's pretty cool. There are some people, even though they're in the bear schedule, they do like to get up a little bit earlier, or they like to stay up a little bit later. So not everybody, there are hybrids, I guess is probably the best way to put it.
Okay, interesting. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
So can you please share the 4 different types of chronotypes that you've named? Because I don't think you've mentioned that yet. I think we've heard 2 of them, wolf and bear, right?
Absolutely. So the first one, the earliest early bird, is replaced by what I call a lion. So I actually chose animals that have these circadian rhythms. And we had to be careful because some people might not want to be a particular animal. Like nobody wants to be a porcupine, or a platypus. So we had to choose ones that were good from a marketing standpoint, but also made sense from a circadian rhythmicity standpoint. And so lions, actually their first kill is before dawn, very early risers. Generally speaking, when you look at the personality characteristics of what I call a lion, also known as an early bird, these are my COOs. These are my organized people. They make a list every day and they go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. They're highly organized, very efficient group of people. And a lot of people wish they were a lion, but to be fair, it's not always the best to be a lion because in many cases what we see is they get up so damn early that they dinner and a movie is out for these people, right? Like, they'll never make it past 9 o'clock. And so socially, some of my lion patients actually suffer quite a bit. Bear is in the middle. Oh, and by the way, lions make up about 15 to 20% of the population. Bears make up between 50 and 55% of the population. And these are my extroverts. These are the people that have a greater tendency to be involved, be very social. They're the people who are at the bar buying people a drink or inviting people to their home for dinner, that kind of thing. Very social creatures, and they make up the largest percentage of the population. Next come the wolves or the night owls, and that's the category that I fall into. And we have a tendency to be very different. We're more introverted. This is usually my artists and my actors and my musicians, sort of my creative types of people. If we make a list during the day, we go from step 1 to step 12 to step 97. Like we're all over the place. But we understand what's going on with us very well. We usually don't show up into the party until 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. We're deeply loyal friends, but we're definitely a little bit strange. We have a greater tendency to take risks. And there are definitely some habits that are not so great that wolves get themselves involved into. And then finally are the dolphins. And so I added insomniacs as part of the categorization, and I used the animal dolphin to represent those. The reason I chose dolphins is because dolphins actually sleep unihemispherically. So half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake and looking for predators. And I felt like that was kind of an interesting representation in the animal kingdom of somebody who's never quite asleep, which is a lot of what happens with my insomniac patients. Now, they're very much like my early risers, very much like my lions. They are very organized, but unfortunately, they've got just enough obsessive compulsive disorder to them where they never quite finished with a project. They're always cleaning up. They're always doing something. So a lot of busy, nervous, anxiety type of energy that comes from these people. Highly qualified, highly intelligent folks, but they definitely have some significant sleep problems. And that was one of the big focuses of the book, was to help those people out.
Fantastic. And that's the 2016 book, correct?
Yes, correct.
Perfect. So I cannot recommend that enough. The 2016 book and the title is so accurate for all the things that sleep and understand your chronotype and then taking action once you have that information. That's what my channel, my message is all about. Information's good, but you got to take action. How much that can improve your life. So I would start with just the quick chronotype quiz. Again, check the description below. And Dr. Breus, thanks so much for that explanation.
Yeah,
is there anything else on chronotype right now? Well, that's a loaded question. I know there's a lot, but due to the interest of time, is there anything else right now you feel is important before we maybe move on to a different?
Well, you know, since we are talking to a crowd who's really interested in longevity, there is some aspect of this that I think would be interesting, and that's looking at times to eat, right? And so there's a lot of data looking at restrictive feeding and intermittent fasting and things like that, and how do those play out in longevity. The point that's interesting when you come at from a chronotype standpoint is many people who do restrictive eating, they only stop eating from like, they eat from like 10 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, or 11 o'clock until 7. And what I've discovered, because I do intermittent fasting myself, is that
we're big intermittent fasters on this channel, so we'll have
perfect.
a lot of people who will be intermittent fasting watching.
Yeah, actually, I wrote a blog on my website if people are interested on intermittent fasting and how it affects sleep. So that's definitely something for people to check out. But what I discovered, Brett, which was so interesting, was now I fast based on my chronotype. So I actually don't start eating many days until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I might eat until 9 o'clock at night. And then I don't go to bed until almost midnight. So I've actually moved that period, my feeding time, if you will, to later. And I find it gives me a lot more energy during the day. And it really seems to work out well. And so, you know, when you look at those types of things like intermittent fasted, restricted eating, fasting mimicking diets, things like that, those all appear to have some very interesting aspects to longevity for sure.
Perfect. And I'll just reference the TEDx talk again, folks, because you show the exact bullet point times for each of the 4 chronotypes of when to eat in that talk. So I'll recommend again, folks, to watch that.
Yeah.
Now, the way that I look at sleep personally is it's the foundation for health. That's the word that I use with my audience and what I'm trying to permeate through the longevity sphere. Because what that means is that just like a house, if you mess up the foundation, everything else is kind of like, yeah, it might not be bad. You still have a granite countertop in there, but it'd be a lot better if that granite countertop didn't crack 10 years later because the foundation was off. So if you get your foundation and sleep correct, you're going to get better benefits from all the diet and exercise and pills and whatever lifestyle choices you're making. Right.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, here's a way that I think about it with people, because a lot of people out there, they kind of take sleep for granted. They're like, oh yeah, I'll go get 6, 7, 8 hours. I'll be fine. Here's the truth of the matter. If you look at the statistics, you can go for about 6 minutes without air. You can go for about 4 days without water. You can go for almost 20 days without food. You can only go for about 6 days without sleep, and you are hallucinating like crazy by the time that happens. And so there's only 2 things in life that appear to be more important to our bodies, and that's air and water, and then comes sleep, right? And so people have to really start to think about that. You know, it used to always be diet and exercise, diet and exercise. Well, we really have to have sleep as part of that conversation. Any wellness conversation, any longevity conversation, as I think you've correctly identified, Brett, is you've got to have sleep as part of that conversation.
Perfect. And just a quick side note, you might find this interesting, Dr. Breus. There's a gentleman on YouTube named Loren Lockman, Loren. He's an American, but he's down in Costa Rica. Okay. And since the mid-90s, he has been doing intermittent fasting retreats and long fasting retreats at his retreat center. They do 21 days minimum. Yeah. So it's, you know, I've done 87 hours is my longest, and I intermittent fast on a daily basis about 18 hours. I just did 48 hours a few days ago, and I broke. I wanted to do 72, but I got really hungry. But it's fascinating, and I just, you know, I'd love for people to maybe have an open mind, and I should be interviewing Loren Lockman soon to learn more, because I'm fascinated, and I still don't know a whole lot about that extreme 21-day plus intermittent fasting. It sounds crazy, but it seems to be working for people. Do you know anything about that?
I know a little bit about it. When you start to look at those long fasts, so number one, to be clear, nobody who has an eating disorder should ever consider doing any type of fasting. That's just going to make your situation 10 times worse. So number one, be careful. Number two, you need to be physically healthy enough to fast. You need to talk with your doctor. And by the way, fasting should not include not taking medications or supplementation or water, things of that nature. And so when you look at the data, if you do a medically supervised long fast, it can actually be very effective. I see people all the time doing these types of things. I mean, I guess a classic example, not exactly probably the best example, if you've ever watched that TV show Naked and Afraid, right? Like they go onto this frickin' island and by the time they leave, they're like 30 pounds lighter, and they've basically been fasting. And so, there are ways to do it. And I'm not saying you need to be naked and afraid to fast. But what I am saying is that, talk with your doctor, see if it's something that makes intuitive sense. And as long as it's controlled, as long as you have water, as long as you have the right supplementation, there are people who I've talked with people who've done 30-day fasts before. I couldn't imagine doing that myself, but I know there are people that do it.
Yeah, great points. I want to learn more about it. It sounds crazy to me right now to do 21 days or 30. But, one thing that I've learned as I keep an open mind and keep getting older and the science keeps unfolding so rapidly in this day and age is that, the answers may lie in some of the most crazy type of scenarios, which is why maybe we haven't figured them out yet.
Right.
So I want to take a little turn real quick and talk about some current news right now. Casper just filed for an IPO. We haven't discussed this at all, Dr. Breus. What do you know about Casper? Are you involved? Just please, any thoughts?
Sure. So to be clear, I have no conflicts of interest. I don't work for Casper. I don't know anybody over there. It doesn't surprise me, but what does surprise me is, and I don't know if these numbers are right, but I think they actually had a banner year in terms of sales and had almost no revenue, if that gives you any indication of what's going on there. This is a marketing company that happens to have a sleep product. I would not go as far as to say that these are mattress people or that they have true sleep products. Now, could their product be useful for somebody for a guest room? Absolutely. Could it be useful for somebody who is just going to need a bed for a year and doesn't want to deal with? Sure, absolutely. But remember, when you look at a product like a mattress, the big thing to remember is this is a piece of furniture you will spend more time on than any other single piece of furniture in your home. So for me personally, I like to lie down on that thing first. I like to check it out first. I would have a hard time just getting a bed in a box and going forward with that. That's me. But I'm also, 51 years old and my body has got some kinks to it. And so there are definitely some things that might make it more difficult. I think younger people who don't have back problems and things like that and are looking for an economical solution, Purple and, whatever they're called, Casper and all these beds, I think they're all pretty much the same. And I think there might be a very applicable solution for people like that. To be fair, again, at 51 years old, I'm not getting a bed, that's wound up in a box and showing up and thinking that it's going to really do me a whole lot of good. I also have low back pain, so I have to be somewhat careful about that as well.
Okay, very interesting. And it's I just saw it in the news yesterday.
Yeah, nothing surprises me with them.
Kind of like Peloton in a way, just
right.
Strong marketing, fuzzy numbers, and
right.
Rushed IPO, in my opinion. But so let's take another quick turn. We're going to get back to really, really clear action items for people to improve their life using sleep and sleep techniques. But right. I want to pivot real quick and learn a little bit more about you and how you became the sleep doctor. And you can start wherever you'd like. I think the audience might find this fascinating.
Yeah, so you don't grow up and say, hey, I want to be a sleep doctor, at least not when you're 51 years old. So when I was in graduate school, it was interesting. I was you do rotations during your residency. So similar to a medical doctor, I had a 1-year residency, and I was very interested in sports psychology and behavioral health and things like that. And the program that I was at actually had a sleep laboratory rotation that you could do for 3 months. And I had worked with all of that equipment previously. I worked my way through graduate school in the electrophysiology department. So I'm the guy that likes to take machines apart and put them back together and kind of weird, nerdy stuff. And I knew how to use all their machines. And so I said, well, I'll do it. I was kind of signed up to do this sleep track. And I got to tell you something, Brett, by the 3rd day, I absolutely fell in love with clinical sleep medicine. And I knew that was where I was going to have my career. You know, I mean, I get the opportunity to help people like that. I mean, it's fast sometimes. I mean, honestly, in some cases, in under 24 hours, you can save somebody's sleep. And let me be honest with you, when you save your sleep, you save your life. Like, it is such a profound impact on people. And I really didn't find any other areas of clinical psychology. And that's what I have my PhD in, is clinical psychology, where I could help that many people that quickly. You know, when you do classic depression or anxiety work, it can take weeks, months, even years before you see treatment gains. And you might only see them in, you know, a few of your patients. Almost all of my patients at least feel a little bit better after we start to work together, depending upon what they may have, whether it's apnea or narcolepsy, insomnia, or just what I call disordered sleep. And so I started out there and started my practice, worked with a pulmonary group in Decatur, Georgia. They had 2 sleep laboratories, and over the course of 6 years, we expanded that to 6, and then, I'm sorry, to 4 rather. And then from there, I moved on to Scottsdale, Arizona, where I was the clinical vice president of operations for a sleep laboratory company. So we had 140 beds in 5 states. We had like 15 labs. And so I was in charge of all the technologists and the medicine that went on there. And I was kind of the liaison between the business guys and the medical guys and gals. So that was really interesting. And then fairly recently, within the last 5 years or so, moved to Los Angeles. And I've been writing books for a while. And now I actually have more of a concierge sleep type of practice, where I do high impact sleep coaching for people. So for people who are already at their top, you know, athletes and CEOs and politicians, they want to get the edge. If they want to get 10% more out of their day, sleep is probably the best way to go about doing that, and getting that good quality sleep is what I've really focused in on now. So it's really been a fun journey. I get to do a lot of cool stuff. You know, I get to do television, as we talked about before, write books, literally travel all around the world, learning more about how other people sleep and helping people out. So it's really been a great journey for me.
That's fantastic. And so when you were in Southeast Asia, was that somewhat business related?
That was all personal. That was just visiting my daughter. But historically, I have done work in Southeast Asia. I work sometimes with the company Princess Cruise Lines, believe it or not. I helped develop their new bed that's on all their ships. And so I went across Asia promoting better sleep at sea, which is kind of awesome. You know, when you think about it, usually when you go on cruise ships, you think about buffet lines and lots of alcohol and staying up too late and things like that. And, you know, Princess had a very different idea. They said, hey, why don't we create an amazing bed and a really good environment so you don't kind of need a vacation from your vacation, if you will. So that's been a lot of fun working with companies like that. But they brought me to Singapore, Jakarta, Tokyo, and Shanghai a couple of summers ago. And I think that's where I started to learn much more about the Asian culture and learned a lot more about their sleep.
Very, very fascinating. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Okay, so let's pivot and let's talk a little bit about something that is important to me, even though I'm not in school. So school times, not just in America, but around the world, and how those have maybe changed in a few areas and what effects those have had on the children and traffic accidents, things like that. And before you answer, I want to throw something out there. I want to make sure that you agree with this first, because I heard this from Dr. Matthew Walker, which is that automobile accidents in the U.S. there's more automobile accidents, or excuse me, let me start over.
The day after the time change, when you lose an hour, there's more automobile accidents. Yes, that is 100% accurate.
Well, there's that, but then also I think what I've heard him say is that there's more automobile deaths caused from sleep deprivation than there are from alcohol intoxication, illegal drugs, and prescription legal drugs combined. But yet
Yeah.
we don't hear about this from our government. And I think the main reason is because there's probably not great tests that police officers can do.
Right.
Is that basically the reason?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult thing to measure, right? And so if you, and especially if like a cop pulls you over, well, your cortisol just went through the roof, your adrenaline's through the roof, and so you are up and alert. You're like, oh crap, I just got pulled over. You know, what's going on, type of thing. I worked a little bit with the highway patrol when I was in Georgia, and that's, we're now going back 15 years ago. One of the things that we knew exactly when somebody fell asleep at the wheel when we would come up on an accident, because there were no skid marks. Like, they never hit the brakes, right? They just plowed right into people. Like, that's how dangerous drowsy driving is. I 100% agree with Matt on that particular point, that, you know, we really have to start looking at that. But it's a tough thing to monitor. And then also, what do you do? You give somebody a ticket and then they go take a nap, right? Like, I mean, it's just hard for us to really understand how to metric that and then what to do about that, other than, you know, having campaigns to educate people to say, hey, look, we all need to start thinking about, you know, how much sleep are we getting? Should we be getting behind the wheel of a car? Is that a good idea or not? Things like that are highly, highly important. And then when you look at school start times, right, that's a whole separate issue. I mean, we're talking about taking specifically teenagers, when you look at high school, and having them get up at the almost opposite time of their circadian rhythm. You know, these are all night owls and wolves, right? I mean, I've got two teenagers, 16 and 17. Neither one of them wants to get up early. And then you force them to get up. And there's great data out of the University of Minnesota that showed that if you had adolescents start approximately 1 hour later, that first period, their grades would improve by almost a full letter grade. So kids who got C's got B's, kids who got B's got A's, just from sleeping in, right? And just the high schoolers, you know, not even the middle schoolers, who can easily get up at that time and do quite well. But, you know, the issues have to do with busing systems, have to do with parents being able to get to work. There's a lot of things that are not taken into account now that we know these data and we really understand it. I was a big proponent in California to get school start times changed. We got some of the bills passed, some of the bills not. You know, it's really difficult when you look at it logistically of how to make something like that happen. But I would argue that it's something that we have to investigate. We've got to get better at it for sure.
Very well stated, Dr. Breus, and I completely agree. I'm so passionate about this. So one thing that you might not know, actually, I don't think you do, I have an 8-week-old son, our first child. And
you ain't getting no sleep, brother.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and lead into that question. And this is super crazy. This morning, I also took my dog to the vet. My dog is normally very healthy. She's 6 years old, never had any problems, but I think I gave her probably some bad meat a few days ago. I'm a bad dad.
Oh, no.
I'm a bad dog dad. And she's throwing up, and she's had diarrhea like the past 60 hours. So between the baby and between the dog getting up every couple hours for diarrhea, it's been a crazy last few nights when normally I am really, really good about getting sleep.
I am sure.
But the question is, you know, what can new parents do with an infant and maybe even up to 1-year-old to kind of, you know, do the best they can during that difficult time for sleep?
Sure. So first of all, there's a lot of ways that you can tackle this problem, right? And so number one is for whoever has decided to stay at home, whether that's the mom or the father, sleep when your baby sleeps, right? To be clear, trying to get the house clean makes no difference whatsoever. Doing chores and things like that, again, probably not your best idea, especially if you have a child that is not sleeping through the night. That's number one. Number two is take shifts, right? And so some people I've used an on-call system where one person does Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the other does Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and you alternate Sundays for who gets up in the middle of the night with the baby. That way, at least one person is getting a decent night's sleep and both people aren't being so disrupted. The third way is to actually use your chronotypes to your advantage. So if one of you is a lion and the other is a wolf, then the lion gets up in the early morning and the wolf stays up late at night with the baby. So there's ways to maneuver it, but it really does boil down to a team effort, right? And so, you know, long gone are the days where only one person is tending, you know, for the child, unless you're in a situation where you don't have somebody else with you. And then Maybe you get a friend to come over and watch the baby a couple of nights a week so that you can get some rest. But the team focused effort, especially with young babies, we're talking from 0 to about 10 to 12 weeks. That's a tough period of time. My favorite methodology for helping babies during that time is called Baby Wise. There's a book, you can get it on Amazon. It used to be a denominational program. Now it's non-denominational. It's an eat, sleep, play program. It works incredibly well. We used it with both of our children, and they were sleeping by 9 weeks. They were sleeping through the night, like 7 to 8 hours, no problem. So I recommend those types of things. If people find that they think that their children have a sleep problem, there's a great book called Solve Your Child's Sleep Problem by Dr. Richard Ferber. It's a little old school, but it's got some great, interesting things. Also, Dr. Weisbluth has a great, I think it's Happy Sleep, Happy Baby or something like that. That's actually a pretty good book. So, for parents who are out there who are looking for resources, there are definitely some resources out there, but I would argue that it's a team sport for sure.
Okay, thank you. Those are some really helpful tips. My wife and I are both bears, so we've been doing the best we can. I actually think we've been doing a really good job because we're very fortunate. We are financially in a good position. We're both entrepreneurs, so we're not forced to go to a job right now. So we're actually able to sleep in, no alarm clock. So
that's awesome.
I can actually only imagine, if I've been in corporate enterprise sales for years, if I had to really just wake up and go back to work. So I think that the paternity plans that a lot of corporations are putting in play now in America is a really good turn in the right direction. LinkedIn's kind of leading that. LinkedIn's a great company. So
yeah,
my only advice is if you're a manager or you own a small business, just really pay attention to this information because it can dramatically change your employees and your business as a whole if you focus on sleep and your employees' needs.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more.
So let's pivot to sleep cycles. We can't have this conversation without letting people understand a little bit about how sleep cycles work. I was really fascinated to learn about this a few years and how it works with the brain. And so whatever you feel relevant to share, please.
So, sleep cycles are interesting because everybody's is a little bit different. There are some averages that we can talk about. And so, first of all, what is a sleep cycle? A sleep cycle is when you go from basically wake to the next REM period, right? And so there's a very particular kind of dance move that your brain wants to do. You go from wake to stage 1, stage 2, down into stage 3, 4, back into stage 2, and then on into REM sleep. That little kind of dance step, if you will, takes roughly 90 minutes, right? And you have approximately 4 to 5 of those cycles, depending upon your chronotype. Some chronotypes will have 5, some chronotypes will have 4, and their cycle might be extended a little bit. So again, these are average numbers. I don't want anybody to go hard and fast on them. But what you can do is you can use this information to your advantage. So as an example, most people say to me all the time, when was the last time somebody told you to go to bed, right? And, the answer is, I don't know, when I was like 8, 10 years old. But our bedtime turns out to be the most variable time for us because most people have to get up for a particular reason, right? School, kids, job, what have you. So our wake up time is oftentimes socially determined. So here's where the math gets kind of interesting. So if we know that there are 5 roughly 90-minute cycles, that's 450 minutes or 7.5 hours of sleep. So first of all, 8 hours is a myth. Let's be very clear. The math doesn't even work, right? So don't worry about getting 8 hours. But let's say you wake up at 6:30. If you count back 7.5 hours, which again is 5 90-minute cycles, that tells you to go to bed around 11, right? Now, if you take chronotype into that, as a bear, this would be a good time for you. As a wolf, that wouldn't make sense for me. I'd probably go to bed at midnight because I want to wake up maybe at 7:30 as opposed to 6:30, right? And as a lion, you would go earlier. But if you can figure out what that chunk of time is that your body works best with based on the number of sleep cycles that you get, that's, I think, where the real advantage can come in from being able to sort of hack your sleep, if you will, is taking the cycles and your chronotype into account together. I think that's where you start to find some real advantages.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Now, what about if you're waking up every 2 hours for your dog's diarrhea? What can you do? I'm just joking. You can't answer.
Then you need to leave your dog outside as long as it's not too cold.
We love her too much. And it's like So we're in Folsom now. I've been in the Bay Area for the last 11 years, but we moved to Folsom, and it gets down into the 30s here in January.
Yeah, it gets cold down there for sure. Yeah,
I
no,
love
you can't leave her outside for sure.
She's a little bit.
I've got a dog that's had that same problem before. There's not much you can do other than keep him in an area that's easy to clean.
Yeah, we got her some meds this morning. She's getting better anyways. But okay, so sleep positions. I think this is really important. I'm personally a side sleeper, but with the newborn now, I'm much better at sleeping on my back because he really likes to sleep on my chest.
Right.
We're all set up so that we're doing things properly, so there's no SIDS. But normally I like to sleep on my side. I've had a bad shoulder in the past, but now that's better. So, taking all these things into factor, injuries, preference, what can we talk about for sleep positions?
Well, when you start to look at sleep positions, generally speaking, the best position is actually sleeping on your back because you can displace weight across the skeletal frame the most evenly there, and you're not jacking your neck to one side or another. Believe it or not, 75% of people sleep on their side, either one side or the other, and a very small percentage of people sleep on their stomach. To be clear, sleeping on your stomach is the worst position you could possibly be in. I unfortunately am a stomach sleeper, and so that makes it quite difficult at times. I've got this, I have set up my pillows in a particular way and try to get that whole thing working. So there are some challenges there for sure. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, you need to sleep in a position that allows you to fall asleep fairly easily and stay asleep. So if you do have a shoulder injury, sleeping on that side is never going to work out well because over the course of the night, it's just going to start to get irritated. But I would say that most people, if you're sleeping on your side, probably one of the better things to do is to put a pillow between your legs because one leg is going to fall over the other one and that's going to pull on your side and that's going to cause some back strain and the lower back area as well. So just being thoughtful about your sleep position works well. Now, one big caveat here is if you snore or you have sleep apnea, if you sleep on your back, it's going to get markedly worse because gravity is going to push all that anatomy to the back of your throat. So if you snore, you're probably going to be pushed over to your side anyway by your bed partner who's kind of giving you the elbow and forcing you to turn.
Great tips. And can I just point out the whole reason why we have to do this interview and why you've made an entire career out of sleep is because, as you mentioned before, the general response of most people when you talk about sleep is, oh yeah, it's important, but like whatever, it's sleep. You just do it and you don't think much about it, and society and school hardly ever talks about it. But yet, once you start going down this rabbit hole, you realize it really is, or can be in certain scenarios, a rabbit hole. And I really like how you gave that caveat there because there always seems to be an addendum or asterisk to a rule when it comes to sleep, right?
For sure.
So f.lux for the...
I love their stuff. They've got great software, great for blue light blocking for your computer. Flux is it's just a good company. So I would highly recommend all of their products.
Okay. I love it. It's changed my life. For those that don't know, can you just speak briefly about blue light and how bad?
Yeah, sure. So, blue light is a wavelength of light that's in the spectrum, right? And so when you look across the spectrum, there's a specific area, 460 to 490 nanometers, which is this very particular wavelength that's called cyan or blue. So why we hear all about it? Why are people buying blue light blocking glasses? And why is all this kind of stuff going on? It turns out that we have very specific cells in our eyeballs called melanopsin cells. When this wavelength of light hits this melanopsin cell, it actually turns off the melatonin faucet in your brain. Remember, melatonin is that key that starts the engine for sleep. And so we got to have that going. And so by having a lot of blue light exposure at night, it prevents our brain from producing melatonin to help us fall asleep. Now, blue light in the morning is awesome. I use a light therapy box and mornings, especially during the winter time when it's pitch black out and I want to be able to, be alert and awake. But generally speaking, you want to try to avoid blue light in the evenings, and it's really because of this whole relationship with the melanopsin cells.
Okay, perfect. And so this kind of ties into me. I'm a transhumanist. I know that term might be kind of scary to some people. They don't know what it means, but I basically believe that humans will eventually merge with machines, and you can kind of already see it happening. I include even glasses, bifocals. That is transhumanism, right?
Got it.
And so as this continues to pick up, I'm only 34, so I see technology racing forward. I just wonder where this is all going to lead to, and I know how important sleep is. So my general thing that I want the audience to make sure they're aware of is make sure the light, or make sure it's completely dark in your room, blackout drapes, keep those blue lights.
But one thing to be careful about with the blackout drapes is they're amazing for falling asleep, but they are hell to wake up in, right? Because it's so dark, it can be tough. And so if you have the opportunity to have those things that can open and close your shades, or you can get one of those dawn simulator clocks in a room that's got the blackout shades, you're going to be better off. I love sleeping in a super dark environment, but I have to be honest with you, it's tough to wake up in.
Now, do you mean once you've actually woken up and your eyes are awake, you just don't want to get up? You kind of want to go back to sleep when you should be waking up because you've had...
No, it's both. I have a difficult time personally waking up in a pitch dark room, even if I've gotten the requisite amount of sleep that my body needs, because my melatonin my melatonin keeps going, right? It's because melatonin is going to keep moving on as long as there's a darkness. Whereas it turns off when there's light. I mean, your whole circadian clock resets with the light. So if you're going to use blue light, if you're going to use blackout shades, make sure that you have, again, a dawn simulator clock or something that's going to turn the lights on for you. Even if it's just a timer that clicks and 7 o'clock in the morning, all the lights in your room turn on. That's going to make your life a lot easier.
Okay, gotcha. So in this scenario, when you have a blackout drape for you personally, maybe you've gotten the requisite amount of sleep that you need, and now you're just staying asleep unnecessarily and not being productive and getting up when you otherwise would.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Makes sense. Okay, so we also should mention on the iPhone, recently within the past couple years or so, they've now added a night feature, which you have to turn it on, go into settings, and do that. But I think that's phenomenal as well because it also blocks the...
So I got some bad news for you.
Okay.
So there was a study done at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in upstate New York, and they discovered that the night shift does absolutely nothing. It lowers the brightness. It doesn't change what's called the color temperature. So to be fair, brightness does have something to do with it. So having it on is good no matter what, but it's not going to be doing as much for you as you think it will.
Okay, so it's not blocking the blue light?
It's not. All it does is it lowers the brightness. And again, while brightness is a factor, it is certainly not the factor.
Well, maybe it'll save my iPhone battery a little bit. And I actually think it's kind of cool. I did it a few months ago. And
I love it. I mean, I still do it. Don't get me wrong. But I don't want anybody out there to think, oh, I can now look at Facebook or read my emails on my phone, which is right in front of my face while I've got night shift on, because that's not the case.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for clarifying.
Sure.
So we got about 10 minutes left. I want to maybe do some rapid fire. So you've been posting on social media quite a bit about, for those who couldn't see who's doing that. So you've been posting quite a bit about terpenes, and terpenes are found in all sorts of plants. They're found in cannabis, otherwise marijuana or weed or Mary Jane. So tell us about terpenes.
Yeah, so I've been doing quite a bit of research looking at cannabis and how does cannabis affect sleep. And full disclosure, I'm working on my own line of cannabis for sleep. It's not there to get people, psychoactive. It's there to get people to sleep. And so when you look at the different constituents, there are lots of different things inside, as an example, the marijuana plant that can be helpful for sleep. There's CBN, there's CBD, there's THC. But those things, I think of them sort of as the horsepower to the engine, but terpenes are the GPS, right? So terpenes are these molecules that are very fragrant. And so anything that has a smell has a terpene, a lemon, an orange, marijuana, all of these different things have terpenes in them. And these terpenes, your olfactory sense or your sense of smell is arguably the most primal sense that you have. It goes straight to the limbic system. And so it really has a dramatic effect on some of the most major processes that go on in the body. And so by understanding terpenes, and I did an entire article looking at a whole host of terpenes that you can utilize as aromatherapy, you can actually really steer yourself quite nicely through the path and use them to help you with sleep. And again, they don't have to be psychoactive. They don't have to come from the marijuana plant. You can get terpenes. You can actually buy terpenes online that are non-hemp derived. So they come from lemons and oranges and wheatgrass and all these different things. So it's pretty interesting when you start to take a look at terpene science and sort of what's going on there, because it absolutely has an effect on people.
Okay, thank you very much. And so then with alcohol, I think what I've heard you say is that your recommendation is to not have more than one drink late at night, and then don't have a drink about an hour before you go to bed. Is that?
So you're close, but not 100%. So it takes the average human body approximately 1 hour to digest one alcoholic beverage. So what I say is drink what you want. If you're at dinner and you want to have 2 glasses of wine, remember you need to give yourself 2 hours after that before you go to bed. So it's an hour per beverage. Also, you should probably drink a glass of water in between, because remember, alcohol is a diuretic, and sleep in and of itself is a dehydrating process. You breathe out almost a full liter of water while you breathe at night. And so if you show up in bed having drank all night and you're dehydrated because you started peeing and then you just keep going and going, you're going to be so dehydrated when you wake up. Number one, it's going to affect your sleep, but number two, you're going to feel like crap. And that's part of the reason you have a hangover, is lack of deep sleep. The other part is due to the dehydration. So be careful with alcohol. Be responsible with alcohol. If you want to have a couple of glasses of wine or spirits or beer, I don't care, go for it. But give your body the opportunity to metabolize through it, because there's a really big difference between going to sleep and passing out.
Okay, thank you. Now, most health enthusiasts and longevity enthusiasts are familiar with the lymphatic system and how that is influential on the body's health. But the lymphatic system is something that I'd love for you to share, where we learned about this and what we know now.
Yeah, so when you look at the glymphatic system and a process called autophagy, it's very, very interesting. But the glymphatic system is kind of like the waste management of the brain, right? And so it comes in and it pulls out all the proteins, all the extra stuff that you don't need, specifically certain proteins called tau, which we now know strangles the nerve cells and can lead to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, things of that nature. And so having a up and running lymphatic system turns out to be incredibly important. And that actually occurs during stage 3-4 sleep. And so when people deprive themselves of sleep by drinking too much caffeine, drinking alcohol, not going to bed at a consistent time, these proteins don't get removed. And when they don't get removed, they build up. And that's when you have those problems. And so to have a very high functioning glymphatic or waste removal system, you really need to make sure that you're getting consistent, good quality sleep.
Okay, perfect. Now, we've already mentioned all of your books. I want to encourage the audience to go out and get your books and get your free ebooks as well.
Absolutely.
Follow Dr. Breus on social media, the links that we've already mentioned that you'll see in the links below. What other things do you have coming up, or what other things would you like to plug?
Well, you know, I would just tell people, if you can, go take my chrono quiz. I think you'll really get a lot out of it. There's a lot of free information. You don't have to buy anything. If you like that information, the book really goes into a tremendous amount of detail, and I think you'll like that. And if you wouldn't mind, you know, checking me out on Instagram or Facebook, you'll see I put out a lot of content. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you actually get twice a week a very detailed blog where you can learn about things like melatonin or CBD or, you know, sleep apnea, things like that. So we really keep up on the research. And I think if you're looking for sleep-related information, my website, thesleepdoctor.com, is probably one of the best places you'll find for it.
I think that's a fair statement. I mean, you are the sleep doctor, and all your credentials.
I'm trying, brother. I'm trying.
Hey, can I just say, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, because you don't know me. You know, you're not getting paid to do this. You are clearly a person, and this is a common theme for a lot of these longevity scientists and experts I interview. You are passionate about what you're doing. You are clearly changing the world for the better. And
we're trying.
Yeah, you're having a huge impact, and I really appreciate it. But I also believe that at 51 years age and throughout your career, I think you might just be getting started, because people need to learn about sleep. You know,
they do, dude.
Very important, and still the general public does not know hardly anything about it, how much it can positively impact their life if they just put a little bit of time into learning and then taking action, right?
Right.
So final thing, this is a contrarian question. This is a question that Peter Thiel and Elon Musk used to ask people in interviews. And let's phrase this towards sleep. Okay. So what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Okay. So very few people agree with me on, oh, that's a good question.
It's supposed to stump you. It stumps everybody.
No, I mean, sleep can be pretty controversial for sure. I think that one of the big things that people, here's one. I think it's okay to fall asleep with the television on.
There we go. That's a good point. You say that. Tell us why, please.
So I'll tell you the story. So when I met my wife, she let me know that, by the way, I sleep with the TV on. And so I said, don't worry, honey, I'm going to fix that. Anybody out there is trying to fix something in their bed partner, good luck. Okay, because it just doesn't happen. So I decided to study her instead to understand why she was watching television. And what I discovered was she really wasn't watching it. She was listening to it. And it was usually an old rerun of an old show, but it was just enough to help distract her mind. She has what I call monkey mind, right? It's just nonstop, never stopping, going, going, going. And so what we see with a lot of these people is if some form of distraction can be made available, then it can actually do them a lot of good. I think I'm actually the only sleep doctor in the universe that says it's okay to sleep with the television on. Because let's be honest, 99% of the TVs have got timer software built into them. Just set the timer for like a couple hours later, fall asleep, and you will be fine.
Okay, I love it. So in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and end it there. I really appreciate it. I want to let you get the last word in. Any final things that you want to leave the audience with?
I just want to wish everybody sweet dreams, and please come check out the website. Sleep is the most critical aspect to your health. If you are interested in longevity, you cannot live long without good sleep. And as a funny quote, here's what I'll tell you. My grandfather, who passed away when he was 103 and 10 months, so he is what I would consider to be a longevity expert, or was rather. He said there's 3 things in life that you should spend money on: shoes, eyeglasses, and mattresses. So with that, the wisdom of the centenarian, my grandfather, sleep's a big deal, everybody. I hope you get the opportunity to make yours better.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Immense gratitude to you, Dr. Breus, and thanks so much for all that you're doing for everybody in this world, even people who don't understand it or appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Take care.
Forever young, I want to be forever young. Do you really want to live forever?
One life,
forever,
one love,
and ever.
one soul.
Untitled.